I had a dream the other night that I want to share with you briefly. In my dream, Jesus was speaking to me, and I could see a pasture, a sort of pasture that would have horses in it or sheep, but it was God's pasture where God's children resided. There were trees in the pasture, there were squirrels and other little animals, and as most little squirrels do, they collect acorns and nuts, and they put those acorns and nuts in the tree so that they will have food for the winter. As I watched them collecting and putting their nuts and acorns in the tree, I saw a couple witches, and these witches did not go through the gate, but they jumped over the side of the fence and into the pasture with the animals, the sheep, the goats, and the smaller animals that were in the tree in God's pasture. And when these witches came in, they went into the tree and they grabbed some of the squirrels' food, some of those acorns and nuts, and then they came back out into the meadow, jumped back over the fence, and they took it out into the world. And then they took what was supposed to be the squirrels' food for the winter, and they took that and they put it in their trees out in the world. In the dream, I thought this was pretty ridiculous, but Jesus was showing me what each of these things symbolize. Witches, warlocks, and people of the world are not in the kingdom of God. But often they do see things in the kingdom of God and they steal those things out of the kingdom of God. And the things that are in the tree of God and in his pasture, the things that are for his children, witches and false believers, those claiming to be Christians but aren't, they steal certain truth out of the area from true believers. They pull it back over the fence and they put it in false trees that don't belong to God. And then when people in the world see trees that are in the world, and these witches say that, well, look at this tree, isn't it bearing good fruit? These morsels did come from God. It is very extremely deceptive, because the fruit that is in that tree at one point was in God's kingdom. It was for a true child of God. It was the truth. And so people of the world perceive the witchcraft of these witches and their trees as the truth. And the children of the world flock to the witches. They flock to the warlocks, and they come to those trees, and they eat the fruit from those trees that was once for the children of God, but now has been polluted by the world and by witchcraft. And by this method, the witches gain power, and they pull many people from the world away that can't hear from God for themselves, that are not in God's pasture themselves or receiving spiritual food from the tree of life or the trees that are in God's kingdom. They then come to the witch. They think that it's true spiritual food because it was true at some point, and they're completely deceived by Satan. They're led to hell. For those that have an ear to hear, they will hear this message. Be warned that there are many witches, but they don't look like the witches you see in movies anymore. They look like the neighbor girl down the street. Maybe they look like your mom or your pastor. Maybe your own sister or someone in your own household. They look like normal people, but they're practicing witchcraft. They know that they're serving Satan, and they are in this world to take your soul to hell.